Opposition MP Raeesah admits she lied in Parliament about a sexual assault case and allegations that the police mishandled it. Singapore's healthcare workers are tired and more are quitting as the COVID-19 pandemic drags on. And 3 letters that define the ongoing pandemic, it's Oxford's Word of the Year. Hello, you're watching The Big Story. I'm Haryanto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Workers' Party MP Raeesah admitting today that she'd lied in Parliament about details of a sexual assault case that she alleged was mishandled by the police. Back on August 3rd, Ms Raeesah told the House that she had accompanied a rape victim to a police station to make a police report 3 years ago. The police officer had allegedly made inappropriate comments about the victim's dressing and the fact that she was drinking. In explaining why she had made up details of that case, Ms Raeesah said she herself had been a victim of sexual assault.
The anecdote was shared by the survivor in a women's support group for women, which I was a part of. I did not share that I was a part of the group, as I did not have the courage to publicly admit that I was part of it. I attended this support group because I myself am a survivor of sexual assault. I was sexually assaulted when I was 18, studying abroad. That assault has traumatized me till this day. Unlike the survivor whose anecdote I shared in this house, I did not have the courage to report my own assault. Yet, as a survivor, I wanted so deeply to speak up and also share the account I had heard when speaking on the motion, without revealing my own private experience. I should not have shared the survivor's anecdote without her consent, nor should I have said that I accompanied her to the police station when I had not. It was wrong of me to do so. I wish to correct the record by retracting the anecdote that I shared on the 3rd of August, and I wish to apologize to the Singapore Police Force. Lastly, I want to apologize to the survivor whose quote I use, to the House, to my constituents, to the Workers' Party, its members, and volunteers, and to my family, especially to my parents. To the residents of Sengkang, I'll work even harder for you. Thank you.
After clarifying details, Leader of the House Indranee Rajah said Ms Raeesah had lied to Parliament on 3 occasions. She raised a complaint against Ms Raeesah for breaching her parliamentary privilege and asked for the matter to be referred to the Committee of Privileges, to which Speaker of the House Tan Juan Jin agreed.
I have to ensure the integrity of our Parliament because Parliament is a platform that other people look at. Singaporeans look at what we discuss here. They believe what we say. When there's untruths, it undermines the trust. Therefore, given what we've heard today, I really have no choice but to raise a complaint under Section 107B of the Standing Orders for breach of privilege suddenly arising based on, firstly, the disclosure by the member that she has not been truthful, has lied to Parliament, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and also because she has been unable to substantiate an allegation that has been made. These are matters which prima facie affect the privilege of Parliament, and I therefore reluctantly have to ask the matter, Mr. Speaker, to be referred to the Committee of Privileges.
Here to discuss this is my colleague, journalist Rei Kurohi. Welcome to the show, Rei. Rei, what is the Committee of Privileges and what do they have to decide on with regard to this case?
So the Committee of Privileges, it's a committee within Parliament. There are 8 members. It's chaired by the Speaker of Parliament, Tan Chuan Jin, and its other members include several ministers. The Environment and Sustainability Minister, Grace Fu, National Development Minister, Desmond Lee, Social and Family Development Minister, Masako Zulkifli, Law and Home Affairs Minister, K. Shanmugam, as well as Leader of the House, Indranee Rajah, and members, Mr. Don Wee and Mr. Dennis Tan from WP. Now, Ms. Indranee and Mr. K. Shanmugam will be recusing themselves from the committee. Ms. Indranee because she's the complainant in the case, and Mr. Shanmugam because it involves his ministry, the Home Affairs Ministry. So what this committee basically does is they investigate any breaches of parliamentary privilege. And what this means is that MPs are generally immune from prosecution or lawsuits for anything they say in Parliament. But that doesn't mean that they have free rein to say whatever they like. A breach of parliamentary privilege has different meanings in different constituencies. In Singapore, generally, it refers to the fact that MPs are not really allowed to make unsubstantiated allegations in Parliament, and the committee finds the MP guilty of such a breach. They can impose several different penalties for it, including a jail term, fine of up to $50,000, and suspension of the member from Parliament, which would also entail the rescinding of their privileges.
So help us understand, based on what you've just said, what is the severity of whatever that's played out in Parliament today?
Yeah, so it's fairly serious. Basically, whenever members are accused of having made unsubstantiated allegations or misleading Parliament, there have been several occasions in the past where members were warned or they were threatened, you might say, with having the matter referred to the committee. But actual instances rather of matters being referred to the Parliament committee are quite rare. The incident that comes to mind is when WMP JB Jeyaretnam was referred to the committee 4 times for various incidences, and he received substantial fines during that time. So, cases where the matters referred to the committee are quite rare, and I would say this is a fairly serious incident.
And Rei, we understand, of course, that Speaker of Parliament Tan Chuan Jin has agreed for the matter to be referred to the committee. So moving forward, what's going to happen and what are the possible outcomes?
So we don't want to speculate too much about what they're going to actually find, but there are several possibilities. As I mentioned, the MP could be jailed, and that jail term can extend up to the end of the current session of Parliament. They can also be fined up to $50,000. They might have their privileges rescinded, which could open them up to prosecution or civil proceedings. In a less severe case, they will simply be admonished or reprimanded by the Speaker of Parliament.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Rei. That was Rei Kurohi, journalist at the Straits Times. Posting on the Workers' Party's Facebook page, Secretary General Pritam Singh saying that Ms Raeesah should not have shared an account that contained untruths in the House and that she was right to admit to it. I quote, "She shared with me that she wanted to set the record straight in Parliament. This was the correct thing to do." An update on Singapore's ICU capacity also shared in Parliament today. Of the 219 ICU beds currently reserved for COVID-19 patients, around 60% are occupied. As at yesterday, there were 130 COVID-19 patients needing intensive care, 61 critically ill and 69 needing close monitoring. As for non-COVID-19 patients in ICU, public hospitals here currently operate about 163 adult ICU beds, with an average occupancy of nearly 80%. Senior Minister of State for Health Janil Puthucheary is saying that over the past 2 months, the total number of ICU beds for COVID and non-COVID patients has been increased to 382. And if needed, another 350 beds can be added through repurposing existing hospital wards. But in doing so, Dr. Janil says any increase must be supported by more staff members trained to care for these ICU patients.
The most important limit is the manpower required to staff ICU beds. Patients in the ICU need trained staff who must be able to provide individualized care, including round-the-clock monitoring and continuous care. So any increase in ICU bed capacity must be supported by an increase in manpower. which has to be diverted away from non-COVID ICU duties. Any redeployed staff or new hires also have to undergo training to operate specialized equipment and medical devices in the ICU in order to care for their COVID-19 patients. Logistically, we can keep stepping up our ICU beds. We have ventilators, we have equipment, consumables, all the things that are needed, but not enough people. As a result, if we keep increasing our beds, we stretch and stretch our healthcare workers. We will come to the point that they will no longer be able to provide that continuous excellent care. Our nurse-to-patient ratio will be lower, which means each nurse will have to take care of more patients than they do today. In a normal ICU, peacetime, pre-COVID, one nurse will look after 1 or 2 patients. If she has to look after 4, she will not have enough hands or time to provide the same level of care.
And giving a sense of how overworked healthcare workers are, Dr. Janil saying that nurses had worked for an average of 160 to 175 hours in September. The manpower crunch has also led to an increase in the resignation rate. Around 1,500 healthcare workers quit in the first half of 2021, compared with about 2,000 annually before the pandemic.
They are getting tired. They are carrying a burden of care that is sometimes unimaginable. Having to hold a phone for a patient so that the family can say their last goodbyes. Holding their patient's hand to keep them company on behalf of the relatives. They need all the support we can give them. At MOH, we are redeploying manpower to serve as healthcare or patient care assistants at our institutions. We are reaching out to more volunteers to join the SG Healthcare Corps and support this important work. We're collaborating with private hospitals to ease some of the load on our healthcare workers in our public hospitals. We are stepping up the recruitment of healthcare workers from overseas. Our public healthcare institutions have also stepped up their outreach to staff to support them through measures that will safeguard their well-being, including counseling services, staff helplines, peer support programs.
According to Senior Minister of State for Manpower, Kopo Kun, shortcomings by employer Sembcorp Marine, dormitory operator Westlight and the Manpower Ministry led to last month's unrest at the Jalan Tukang Dom that drew riot police to the scene. Since then, authorities have tightened coordination and communication with dorm operators and employers.
There were shortcomings by all parties. On the employer's part, workers were upset and had raised issues about food quality and hygiene. On the dormitory operator's part, they struggled to cope with the surge in numbers. On ACE's part, we stepped in but did not put in sufficient resources in time to resolve the problem. Following the incident, all parties have diligently addressed the issues, restored calm to the dormitory and to the workers. We have also conducted a thorough review and tightened up the processes, especially for escalating and calling in more resources to deal with the surge in cases that needs to be conveyed. ACE has also tightened up coordination and communication with dormitory operators and employers when handling mass testing exercises and a surge in cases. Investigations into failures to fulfill regulatory obligations, for example, in food safety and hygiene issues, are ongoing.
Meanwhile, the retirement age for Singapore workers will be raised to 65 years old and the re-employment age to 70. But first, the retirement age will be raised to 63 from July 1st next year, which will also see the re-employment age raised to 68. The timing of the subsequent shifts will be subject to agreement among the tripartite partners of the Manpower Ministry, Labour Union and Employers Federation. Various rules around CPF will also be streamlined and simplified to make it easier for members to receive their retirement payouts. While most consumers will not see an immediate increase in electricity prices, they could see an increase next year as energy prices increase globally. Spot gas prices have risen by around 5 times since March, which Second Minister for Trade and Industry Tan See Leng described as an unprecedented storm in the global energy market. But he assured that the government will help affected households and businesses.
Most consumers in Singapore have been cushioned somewhat so far. 99% of household consumers are on standard price plans with retailers or the regulated tariff rate, and about 96% of businesses are on fixed price or discount off tariff plans. These have risen by far less than the price of gas or wholesale electricity. However, the sustained high fuel prices will eventually feed into our electricity bills to reflect the cost of electricity production. Eligible households will continue to receive U-Save rebates to support them with their utility expenses. MTI will also work with MOF to monitor the situation and study whether further assistance is required for affected households and businesses.
Dr. Tan also saying there won't be disruption to electricity supply for the 150,000 households and businesses under the 5 electricity retailers which have announced plans to leave the market. They will either be transferred to another retailer or back to SP Group, where they can choose to purchase electricity from another retailer. With Muslim nurses now allowed to wear the tudung at work, hospitals here saying they may use their own headscarves as long as they follow organizational guidelines, like not compromising the proper usage of an N95 surgical mask and not having any embellishments on their tudung. Hospitals also said the headscarf will not be allowed in high-risk settings that require more stringent levels of cleanliness, like operating theatres. Local rapper SUBHAS NAIR was charged today with 4 counts of attempting to promote feelings of ill will among religious and ethnic groups between July 2019 and March 2021. NAIR was given a 2-year conditional warning by the police in 2019, stating that if he re-offended, he could be prosecuted for this incident on top of any fresh offences. He was offered bail of $10,000 and the case has been adjourned to November 29th. And no word better captures the atmosphere of the past year than this. Vex is the new Oxford Languages Word of the Year. Unlike the word vaccine, which is common in English, vex was relatively rare until this year. Well, why did the judges like the word? It's short and punchy and can be used in all sorts of combinations to make new words. Now, video calls are great, but nothing beats a face-to-face meeting. Well, that is the verdict from our Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, who's on his way home after the G20 summit in Rome. Posting about his one-on-one meetings with fellow leaders, Mr. Lee said these face-to-face exchanges are a valuable experience difficult to replicate via a Zoom conference. Now it comes as G20 leaders urged meaningful and effective action to limit global warming. The G20, which includes China, India and the US, accounts for 60% of the world's population and 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And from Rome, many world leaders are now in Glasgow for the COP26 conference, described as the last best hope to bring climate change under control. So, what are world leaders looking to achieve? And can the targets be met? Our climate change editor, David Fogarty, reports from COP26.
There are many issues at play at COP26. One of the most important is to get a deal in which nations agree deep emissions cuts. A key aim of the talks is to get a deal also to ensure that the world does not warm beyond 1.5 degrees. Going beyond this threshold basically will ensure the world will suffer much more extreme weather, such as storms, floods, droughts, and faster sea level rise. So the only really sensible outcome is a clearer direction on how the world will cut greenhouse gas emissions, mainly from burning fossil fuels, and much greater investment in renewable energy. Another top issue is money and how this can be channeled to poor nations to help them reduce their carbon footprint and take steps to buffer their people from climate impacts. Rich nations had agreed almost a decade ago to give $100 billion every year to developing nations. But till today, they are not putting their money where their mouth is. Carbon markets will also be a key issue on the table. The rules expected to be hammered out on how countries can buy and sell carbon credits to meet their climate targets. Will countries be able to do a deal at COP26? Well, find out by following us over the next 2 weeks.
Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. Join me tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.